We start by asking cabinet members if they have any updates for the group. And if you're online, just raise your hand and our team will be watching. Commissioner Durantes.
I just, it's a comment, and I was sharing just before the cabinet convened that I just recently came back from the Child Welfare League of America's national conference, and I wanted to lift up the collaboration between the Department of Children and Families and the Office of Early Childhood, very specifically the Head Start Collaborative, and where other jurisdictions around the country are really grappling with how to collaborate, really that further upstream approach. We've been at it now for since 1999, right, to the point where their quarterly meetings have about 120 participants, and it shows that there is an opportunity to collaborate and partner in community to give kids a really great head start with their parents being able to be connected to services, really high quality services early on. So I just want kudos to our partners for being able to lift up a partnership that other jurisdictions emulate.
Yes, Commissioner, I remember one of my first sort of public meetings was with you at a Head Start meeting, and we had a really good time there. So yes, Ava.
I mentioned it in our steering meeting, but I guess I'll add it here that Catherine Lantigua, a home-based provider and owner of 2 home-based childcare locations, and Sandra Dill, also home-based provider, were able to represent providers nationwide in the Care Summit in Washington, D.C. And they were able to also meet and talk with President Biden while he was signing his plan to support early education throughout the nation. So I thought that was very exciting. Yeah.
Yes, and Catherine is both a member of the Blue Ribbon Panel and the Early Childhood Steering Committee. So she was super excited, and Ava, thanks for all you're doing, to mentor her as a young leader in this field. We need all we can get. New leaders. So it's wonderful to see her get that kind of recognition. Any other updates? Yep. Kristen?
Let's start with Karen Rainville. Karen, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I have just a quick save the date for you. So the kayak conference will once again be in person this year. We're thrilled to be back in person on October 28th at Tunxus Community College. And we will be including a reception the evening before, recognizing early childhood achievements across the state. Something we've been missing for a couple of years with COVID. So we're really excited to be able to celebrate the accomplishments of providers in Connecticut.
Thanks so much, Karen. That's exciting. And I know we've had a conversation. We want to, work with you on that and make sure OEC resources are available for folks to know about Elevate and other programs that support early childhood programs. So we appreciate the partnership.
Absolutely.
You had another update?
Thanks, Karen. Yep, Shelley Nolan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I also just had a save the date for folks. Demas will be convening our second annual conference on LGBTQ plus resources. And so that will be a full day on June 2nd. And I can send over the save the date with the registration information to the point of contact for this group for distribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much. These are moments in meetings like this at the legislature where I feel so happy to live in Connecticut as a LGBTQ plus leader in the state. So thank you for that work at Demas. Anyone else?
No one else online. I just want to let you know that Louis Talarita is also president. President. Yes, he's president. No, he's present.
Hi,
Thanks for joining us, Louis.
Welcome. I want to announce that on May 11th, the Office of Early Childhood and really grateful for SVP, the Connecticut Project, and the Early Childhood Funders Collaborative for their support of a May 11th event for the Blue Ribbon Panel on childcare, specifically focused on workforce, to bring workforce challenges to the fore. And It will feature as the keynote speaker, June Lee Lay from the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. A few of us here were able to see him this summer. He really gets down to why those adult-child relationships are so important for child development. We really thought we'd ground the day in not just, oh, there are workforce shortages. That can feel very abstract. Workforce shortages translate into sort of challenges to that adult-child relationship. So we need to support the caregivers so they can support the children. And then there will be a panel of Connecticut leaders talking about the challenges for the early childhood workforce here, followed by breakout sessions for feedback. And then we will have a national panel featuring Erica Phillips from the National Association for Family Child Care. And the second is Alyssa from NAEYC. I'll never say her last name right. I'm so sorry. Mwena Lupembe, and I really apologize. There's no excuse for that, but I didn't have it in front of me. So they will be talking about the national perspective and bring us some examples from states that are making progress. And then Rian Alvin Evans, the former head of NAYC, will be closing out the day. We have about 190 people signed up as of this morning. We have room for 250. And it's really important that I announce, we know that not everyone can make this. There will be a public hearing before the Blue Ribbon Panel hears the recommendations around workforce. And we will have the feedback questions available to the field and feedback for the panel before the May 11th event. So there'll be many chances for feedback besides that event. But for folks that are able, we're excited and certainly impressed to already have 190 people a week before the event. And special thanks to Monisha Gibson, who's been doing a lot of heavy lifting around that event. And the other announcement I have is that Eloisa Melendez is here. Eloisa, if you'll stand up. Eloisa is going to be sort of the lead for OEC, organizer, connector, lead person for the Blue Ribbon Panel for Governor Lamont. And Governor Lamont's so grateful you took this on, Eloisa, and she has been with the Women's Business Development Center, so she really knows the early childhood issues, and she knows the state pretty well. And you bring some Fairfield County to the OEC, which is important to have different parts of the state. So welcome. And that ends our announcements, unless anybody else has any. Okay. So, very timely. The next topic we're going to talk about is Elena Truworthy and I are going to update the cabinet about the Blue Ribbon Panel structure. So we thought it would be a good idea just to ground folks in what the structure is going to be. I note that Karen Lott is here, who is sitting on our Blue Ribbon Panel. Thank you for your service, Karen. So you all can find Karen in the room if you want to give her feedback as a panel member. But we thought it would help because we have a lot of people attend and watch these meetings, a chance to help people understand the structure. And I think every time we talk about this, we get feedback that is helpful. That's why we've added the May 11th event, because folks felt we needed more feedback about the workforce challenges, that was too big just to have one public hearing. So we're open to your feedback as you have it, and cabinet members should feel free to weigh in either on chat or as we're going, feel free to raise your hand if you need clarification. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so what is a Blue Ribbon Panel on childcare? Some of you may not have heard about it. Governor Lamont sees childcare as critical both for child development and for our state's economic security and for families who need to get to work. And so given the challenges both for the system and for families, he's appointed a panel. We've worked together to appoint a panel to develop a strategic plan for the child care system. We are charged with coming up with a 5-year actionable plan. It's proving to be quite a challenge. It's taking a lot of efforts. I'm really grateful for the team OEC that's sort of doing the first layer of work. why this is important.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. So we're really excited about this work of the Blue Ribbon Panel because we know in our early care and education system that there are some significant challenges. And what it's going to take are some long-term creative, very inventive and innovative thinking that really leads to durable and sustainable solutions. But some of those challenges that we just want to highlight, and many of you know them already, really are around access, affordability, and quality. We know that across our state, families just don't have the access that they need to care and at a price that they can afford. And for our providers, the current market prices, it just costs more than what they're getting in regards to revenue. And so it makes it very difficult to operate and sustain a business. And, when we think about quality too, the reduced quality really has implications when it comes to child development and the experiences that children and families have within the early years that we know are so critically important to brain development and to really laying the future foundation for their learning and development. And we know that workforce, just as the commissioner highlighted, we're really having that special session on workforce, and it's not a unique situation that Connecticut's facing. Across our nation, many states, or all states, I should say, are facing these significant workforce challenges. And we know that wages are a very important piece to the conversation as well. And so these are some of the challenges that we'll really be digging into in this work of the Blue Ribbon Panel. And but the good thing is that Connecticut, as a state, we are poised to really be looking at and thinking about these solutions and putting these solutions in place. There's so much work that has been done with partners and stakeholders for the last couple of years, really thinking outside of the box, really thinking in different ways. And so we have state investments that we can couple with federal investments to really think about how to enhance access to childcare. We have such strong partners right in our ecosystem of our early childhood system, philanthropy, advocates, providers, partners, families, all at the table, willing and able to help. We have been launching innovative models from across the agency, including our quality improvement system that launched in 2022. So we have these really strong foundational pieces from which to build. And we've been so lucky to have the federal preschool development grant for the last, I don't even know, 6 years, where we've really been able to, think about our systems, not in silos, but how they're impacting our families, our workforce, our economy across the state. So building upon this foundation, we're really poised to deliver just an aspirational plan, but with actionable items as well. And so building upon this vision that we have created for early childhood, that all families in Connecticut will have access to equitable and community-driven early education and care systems that improves outcomes for children and families. And we really are looking at sustainability, our system grounded in the recognition that the full cost of a professional and well-compensated workforce is critically necessary. And this should look familiar to many of you because you helped us to create this all together. But there are pillars in which we are grounding our work and our vision and what's guiding us, right? So guiding us around, how do we create a more equitable system with increased access? How do we really listen to and have those channels available for community voice so that it can inform the process before decisions are made? Being outcomes oriented, and again, investing in the ECE workforce.
Thanks so much, Elaine. Thanks so much, Elaine. I just want to make sure folks can hear me because I think there was some audio. There were some audio issues before. Okay, now I'm going to talk you through the project scope and introduce you to the panel members. Next slide. So these are the panel members. I know in the room maybe it's a little hard to see, but what is important to understand is to Governor Lamont, it was important to have a broad range of panel members. They're folks who run childcare programs and family childcare homes. They're folks who are advocates. They're public school folks. They're business leaders, and folks who do support for family childcare homes. So I think the mix is important. They're also the ranking members of the Education Committee, who that's the Committee of Cognizance over OEC. So, you know, any legislative changes go through the Education Committee, and we want to partner across the aisle with Democrats and Republicans. And so this also has a lot of representation from around the state. We have philanthropy at the table who have been partners with us since we were even opening the Office of Early Childhood. So we're really grateful for their service because it is a big commitment. And we kicked off April 19th with a really successful launch. Okay, next slide. Just so folks know, sort of, it's a very iterative process with a lot of engagement. So we're going to be engaging with community members and expert advisors for the panel. We are asking people to think outside the box, not to look at what is now, but what could be. And we're really learning a lot from other states and other countries who have already taken this step. So we're not out there on our own. Elena just talked through some really big strengths that we have in Connecticut. We are really ahead of other states with our governance system. We are ahead of our other states with the collaboration across agencies in Connecticut. And I think that we are, I think one of the other big strengths in Connecticut, which a lot of states complain about, but our advocacy community is engaged and active. And what we learned in COVID is that if we had ideas and brought them out to the public, to providers, to the advocates, we got good feedback and adapted them. And our programs are models for the nation from ARPA, and that's because they were informed by others. So we've really developed this process to model that, where there are many chances for feedback and improvement. At the center is we want to support the needs of every child, support that early brain development. And we know that you can only support the child if you're also looking to support the family and engage that family, that it's a unit in early childhood. And I think Commissioner Durantes and I agree on that, right, Vanessa? 100%. Okay, next slide. So the governor has asked me to lead this, and we are breaking into work streams that I will go over in a minute. And the panel, we really see the panel as asking us tough questions, making suggestions, making connections, asking us for data, coming back to them. And we also see them as recipients of a lot of feedback from the public. So every work stream has public feedback that will be brought to them before they even arrive at a meeting. We're really grateful. We have consultants because of the preschool development grant, and also because of the generosity of SVP. And that has made a really big difference. So the OEC staff and the panel members have professionals who are supporting the system. And the team OEC has been at the table in an unbelievable way. I can't imagine the number of hours, Elena, the past 2 weeks people have put in on top of their work on these topics. Look at them all shaking their heads. Whew. But we really appreciate it's iterative in our own agency, believe me, before anything even gets out. And we have folks with some really great ideas and feedback for us. And then we're really lucky at OEC. We have a parent cabinet. We brought this to them last week, I believe, and they had feedback for us. We have stakeholders who we met with a couple of weeks ago who've been helping us guide strategic planning for a couple of years. And then we have this cabinet who's here today to give us feedback. So next slide. So I've already said this, there's going to be a lot of chances for feedback. Next slide. I think this gives you a picture of the 4 work groups promised earlier in the presentation. We're really starting with equity and access We feel like that group has to meet first because equity is at the center of all this work. And access is an issue that both impacts providers and families. You can't have access if providers can't hire staff, if they can't run their programs, and you can't have access if parents can't afford the care. So we felt like we're going to start there for panel members and then move out to workforce and quality, and then come to systems, and then funding and costs. So they'll have work sessions and input sessions on all of these topics. We anticipate when we write the report that it probably won't have these 4 items. It's not like it's going to be broken into these 4 items because there's so much overlap we're finding in all of these issues that the panel might have other ideas about how to structure this and how to bring forth a plan. But this is for those of you watching at home who want to be part of the process. There'll be a public hearing before every panel member on this topic that you'll be able to participate in. Okay, next. So I was saying we have work groups at OEC. They start with a problem and opportunity statement. Then they come up with goals. We look nationally and internationally for promising strategies, and then we're going to bring those to the panel, and they'll take a look at them and ask us questions about what needs to change in the system, what investments might be needed. And then this is all going to have to be staged. Everything's not going to change all at once. And I think OEC, for example, will be charged with really thinking about, for example, child outcome data. We're not going to have that in 6 months, no matter what the panel says. We need a system. So it will be staged and strategic. Okay, next slide. Oh, I know. Oh, I'm sorry, I just took your slide. Carry on. Whoops, took 2 of your slides.
That's okay. So here we just wanted to lay out a little bit of a timeline of where we are and where we will be by the end of this year. And so as Commissioner Bai just talked through, we're really starting to get into, the meat of the issues and each of these work streams. And equity is such at the center and will be carried through each of these work streams as well. And so through the summer months, we'll really be working on goals and recommended strategy development, outlining the draft, and really socializing as it comes towards the end of the year of the October-November timeframe. And then in December, it will be time for plan submission. And so the next slide we'll really talk about, but really just want to underscore the need and importance and how we value the feedback and the input and the ideas from all of you, from each of the different bodies, from everybody out there in the field, to the families who are experiencing our system or not. And so this is a more detailed timeline. I think that Commissioner Bai will walk us through.
What I'm going to ask is if you can go to full screen here. I think it's really small. I'm sorry, folks in the room. I think at home you all can see it, but it's a little harder in the room. There you go. That's a bit better. I think even if you can't read the words necessarily, what you'll see is we had the kickoff in April, and then we have the workforce event May 11th. Then the panel gets into its work starting on May 24th with the first panel member on panel session on equity and access. But the week before that is a public session. I'm wondering, I think I should be able to read it. So that hearing on workforce will be, I got to go backwards. The equity and access public hearing will be May 19th from May 19th before the 24th. And then the workforce hearing will be June 8th from 5 to 6 p.m. So you can see before every topic, there is a public hearing, your public listening sessions, and there will also be forms out for folks to fill in. If they can't make the public listening session, they can bring information. So we're going to go first equity, then workforce, then the systems deep dive, then funding and costs. And then in September, we'll have an outline of a plan, and then we'll have a full week of feedback where there'll be many, many hours of folks coming and telling us what they think of the outline and how they think it could be better. So I think the big message here is we don't think we have the answer right now at OEC. We have some starting pieces. The panel will ask good questions, and we'll continue to work with national organizations and bring in experts to give us ideas. But it's really providers and parents and community members and public schools that we want to hear from as we build out this system. So we'll stop there and take questions. Yes, Eva.
So providers received an email from OEC this past week inviting them to the May 11th event. I think it'd just be helpful if, because this is recorded, if you could just share a little bit of those details of the invite.
Yes, thank you. What we're going to have an event with lunch starting at 11:30. Then the panels will start at noon, where we have a national speaker, Junlee Lay. Then we have a panel of providers, including a family child care provider and several center providers. Then there are breakout sessions to gather feedback, followed by another panel of national experts from the National Association of Family Child Care and the National Association of the Education of Young Children. And then we will have close out with a keynote, sort of a closing session with Rhian Alvin Evans, who was at NAEYC as CEO, but now has her own childcare company, and it's just going to be talking about the unifying framework, which is a national goals for states around workforce development that we're using as a framework as we're doing our workforce work. And it's at Nora Community College, right?
Is it recorded or is there a Zoom link for that live day?
Yes, CTN has asked for all the dates, and I don't know, for those of you that were able to watch the April 19th date, they do a really great job and professional job of recording, and they have this date, but they never know if a session day is called or if there's some emerging event. So we will not know till early next week if CTN is carrying it. We will try to tape the keynote. Oh, Maggie? Okay, Maggie has sent them the agenda. We have been in touch with them. And we found with the kickoff that made a really big difference because the quality of their of their production. We will try to tape if they're not able to do it. It won't be as high quality, but we will do our best to get the information out there. Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else? Well, a big thank you to people in this room, because we have feedback from just about everyone I'm looking at who works in early childhood in the state. And so we'll keep listening and learning. And I will say in my career in early childhood in Connecticut, which is long, this is the most hopeful I felt in a long time. And with the loss of Build Back Better, where we were looking at $220 million, and many of us who felt we were very close and lost it, but I really am grateful to Governor Lamont for saying, I'm sorry, that might have fallen through, but we still need a plan in Connecticut. And the participation has been unbelievable. And the first event, for those of you that were there on April 19th, was full and interesting, and legislators were engaged and panel members were engaged. And Ava, thank you for your presentation. We heard from the field. So that's going to be our modus operandi. We're going to keep listening, and we're super excited about this effort, and really grateful to Team OEC for all their work on it. Okay. Next, Deb Fliss, Elsa Joan, and Deb Watson are going to come talk to us about the Lab School Initiative, which is, some of you at home might not know that in early childhood education, the schools where teachers get their training on campuses are called lab schools. And so lab schools are a super important part of our workforce development structure. And across the country, lab schools have been in peril, and colleges have been stepping away from their lab schools. I know I got my training on an on-campus site, and there's nothing like it. And so as the pandemic hit and colleges and others were hit with stresses and strains, Deb Fliss and I talked about how important it was to maintain lab school infrastructure. And so we set aside some funding from the American Rescue Plan to work with the lab schools, both with some funding and also asking them to support our professional development system. And I know Deb Watson and Elsa Jones have been doing that. So Deb, I'm going to turn it to you for a quick overview and then hand it over.
Great, thank you. So just a little more to add to the context that the commissioner said. The Lab School Investments Initiative is, as she described, addressing workforce needs and stabilization of lab schools at the same time. And those workforce needs are actually being addressed in multiple ways. Very public facing is the support for students in higher ed early childhood programs who are learning the skills of being outstanding teachers. And so we are supporting their efforts to do that. We are also, through the Lab School Investments, providing professional development in the communities where the lab schools are located so that they are bringing their knowledge and their expertise out to the early childhood providers in their communities. Those of you on the early childhood listserv may have seen some of the most recent announcements from some of the lab schools about activities and coursework that they are making available. The initiative also focuses on bringing together the ECE team at the lab school and its higher education institution to make sure that those folks are connected, sharing, and supporting each other through representation of the administration, the faculty, and the lab school staff. All of these activities leverage many of our important publications, like the Early Learning and Development Standards, to make sure that woven throughout the student experience, the professional development, and the team's planning, those important documents and publications are known and are utilized so that everyone is hearing their importance and able to utilize them in the implementation of early childhood programming. I'm going to turn over to Elsa and Deb, who are going to give you more of the details of the project. Deb Watson is the OEC project lead, and Elsa Jones is the CSCU project lead, and they are working closely together, again, in collaboration, cross-agency, to make sure that this project represents both entities and is full-on support for the early childhood workforce. Thanks.
Thanks, Deb. Is this okay? Mike? Thanks. I'm very excited to be here, and I know Elsa is too, and we're very glad to have this opportunity to share information about the Lab Schools Investment Initiative. I have to say that doesn't go past me to realize that the Lab School Investments Initiative, or LSII, as we should say to shorten it, don't exactly trip off the tongue. And I think that's because we kind of took it over the top when we added the word investments. But I don't apologize for that, because I think the terminology of investments in relation to the lab schools and our communities is a good one. And it's very much a part, I think, of our philosophy. So good luck saying it. I still have to think about it. Elsa and I both feel passionately about this initiative and its potential for sustaining and strengthening early childhood programs all over the state while it's sustaining and strengthening the lab schools. We're also very passionate about lab schools in general, or specifically, as the case may be. Many early childhood professionals have stories to tell about their own experience in the lab school. I'm sure many of you are among those of us who have those experiences. For most of us, the first taste we ever had of working with young children in a group was in a lab school. For me, and for many of you, that taste developed into a career-long appetite for the work. My fellow students and I, way back when, before I went to my first lab school visit, were schooled, I will say enthusiastically, rather than a more negative word, but it was intense, on professional behavior and the expectation that we were going to be in a professional setting and we were to behave as professionals and we would be treated as professionals. That added a certain nervousness to our excitement, but it all ended fine. It was my first experience being treated as a professional, and being expected to behave like one. And all of this for me, as I know it did for many others, prompted, again, a career-long consideration of professionalism. What is it? How does it manifest itself? And how do we inspire it? Bottom line for most of us in this room is that a good way to inspire early childhood future educators is a lab school. When I arrived at my first visit there, I felt like I really had arrived and that I was where I belonged, and I was in awe of the busyness and engagement of the children and the more subtle but intentional engagement of the teachers. I was hooked, and I was proud to be there in the early childhood education pipeline. The Lab School Investment Initiative acknowledges and promotes the fact that strengthening the lab schools goes hand in hand with strengthening the early childhood workforce pipeline. In the context of a post-pandemic world, our early childhood system is even more fragile than it was pre-pandemic. As we're also painfully aware, our programs are struggling valiantly, but still struggling, and the lab schools are no different. But given the space the lab schools inhabit, they have leadership capacity that can be maximized and leveraged to support their own cause, as well as the causes of their colleagues in their communities. As part of OEC, the lab schools can participate in the national effort led by OEC. Well, it is led by OEC, but I meant to say NAUSC, to pursue high quality through increased alignment with state and national standards. And they can also embrace OEC's efforts to instill a mindset of continuous quality improvement in their programs and the programs in their communities. LSII, as Deb mentioned, began as a collaboration of Connecticut State Colleges and Universities and the Office of Early Childhood, intended to invest funds from ARPA to sustain and strengthen Connecticut's lab schools, the ECE workforce pipeline, and high-quality early programming statewide. We recruited 11 lab schools who, in collaboration with their early childhood education faculty and the administration, committed to several things. They committed to developing or operating a lab school linked to the institution's credit-bearing program in early childhood education. They committed to a lab school utilizing the institution's ECE higher education students in the classroom, either as paid staff or students receiving observation or practicum experience. They also committed to enrollment in Connecticut's early childhood professional registry, as well as accreditation with NAUSC's accreditation of early learning programs and its accreditation of early childhood higher ed programs. Each participating lab school has established an LSII team designed to absolutely ensure collaboration of the lab school, the ECE higher education faculty, and the administration of the institution. The core team at the beginning was to consist of the lab school director, the ECE higher education program coordinator, an administrator, and at least one ECE higher education student. Our established teams to date range in size from 5 to up to 12 to 15. They collaborate together with their colleagues in other lab schools through our weekly office hours, roadmap meetings, quarterly meetings, and PLCs. The structure that we use emphasizes communication, shared learning, and collaboration through these various vehicles. More details about the nuts and bolts of the initiative are available in our original kickoff PowerPoint, which will come to you in the email post this meeting. For more information, you can also go and take a look at our web pages on the OEC website. To get those, to find them, you click first on About OEC. Remember, we're a partnership, and then in the drop-down box there, select Partnerships, and then you'll find the lab school. We're planning to soon have an individual page for every lab school so that we can promote the professional developments you've already heard about and we'll hear more about in just a moment. In this, sorry, I thought I had my pages mixed up. I got panicky there for a second. In this work, we also use the Professional Leadership Roadmap, the author of which is sitting here next to me. Each team uses this roadmap to chart its course and implementation of LSII, and you're going to hear a lot more from Elsa shortly. In our efforts to embed a mindset of continuous quality improvement, our intention is to strengthen and solidify lab school connections with quality improvement supports at OEC like those available through Elevate, our new QIS system, through AQIS, our accreditation quality improvement supports, and through the registry, among others. There are many of these connections to be made. In solidifying these connections in our lab schools, we hope to leverage lab school leadership capacity to provide PD to their community providers that will solidify these connections for them and for their colleagues in their communities as well. Let me give you, that's a lot of words. So let me give you some examples. A lab school could decide to add nurturing a mindset of continuous quality improvement to its roadmap. If they did that, they could begin by establishing a relationship with OEC service navigator assigned to their community. That service navigator could in turn provide supports available from Elevate, OEC's new quality improvement system already referenced, and can further support them in continuous improvement beyond accreditation, which they all already have, and continue to support them in developing their leadership capacity. Another example would be a team could develop its leadership capacity by identifying areas of strength and expertise on their roadmap, and then providing PD for community providers in those areas of strength and expertise. I have other examples, but I'm going to skip over them in the interest of time. You'll be given more information about those in the PowerPoint that you'll receive. I do want to emphasize, however, that another approach the teams could take is to find ways to welcome observers, families, and professionals so that they can come to the lab schools to see the national state and national standards coming to life in the classroom. As Deb mentioned, each lab school partner in the initiative must allocate 20% of its LSII ARPA funding to professional development for community providers. To that end, they're currently engaged in providing a wide range of professional learning opportunities, and I do want to give you some examples of those. One of the allowable uses of ARPA funding is for mental health supports. In December, Gateway Community College offered Relax and Reset, a learning experience for community providers on preventing compassion fatigue. In this, they were given tools to calm anxiety and reduce stress. Now, if compassion fatigue is a new term for you guys, for us, we feel like it may be a new term for you. Elsa and I have adopted it, and we'd much rather say that than we have burnout. So from time to time, we all get compassion fatigue. Here's an example I'm cutting. UConn recently offered a meet and greet for family childcare providers in their community. They set up their classrooms and the playground to share creative and engaging activities that brought nature inside and took the classroom outside. The visiting providers were able to stroll through the classroom at their leisure and do so on the playground as well, to take in all the rich learning environments on display by UConn. They were also able to have leisurely conversations with teachers in the classroom who were all present, and were able to ask the questions that they were interested in about curriculum, classroom, and playground design. They left with a bag of resources for their classrooms. Our lab school providers, as I've said, are providing a wide range of professional learning opportunities, often stepping out of their comfort zone to do that. I'd like to share an example with you now where that was very much the case. That example is the recently concluded Barbara Kaiser events, which challenged its organizers, the lab schools, in terms of logistics, registration, learning platform, evaluations, and sheer numbers. The former lab school director at Naugatuck Valley Community College, Abby Kalo, and her team, as well as lab school directors and teams from Capital, Gateway, Housatonic, Manchester, Norwalk, and Tunxus, all came together to bring these events to their communities. I'm a pyramid girl all the way. I go way back with pyramid, back to a time and date I won't share. And so I'm not as familiar with Barbara Kaiser's work as some of you may be, or as my lab school folks were, but it was a tremendously popular offering. Barbara is a nationally recognized expert on the social emotional development of infants, toddlers, and preschool children, and provided her trainings via the virtual platform. The interest in her work and the concrete, accessible, and effective information she's known to share on supporting social emotional development of young children was of such interest to all of our communities that caused the 6 additional lab school teams to come together with Naugatuck Valley in order to serve a much larger audience than a lab school could have done on their own if they'd gone on it on their own. They offered 8 separate professional learning opportunities, and a total of 482 providers participated in the 3-part series for teachers, and another 228 participated in the leadership sessions. Now, everything I've talked about at this high level begins and ends with the professional leadership roadmaps. As I said, these chart the course of LSI implementation for each lab school. I believe the roadmaps are where the rubber hits the road in our success with this initiative. My partner in crime here, Elsa Jones, designed the roadmap to reflect everything you can read about in detail in the PowerPoint that you'll receive. She works with the teams on a weekly basis in the development and execution of these roadmaps, including some of the, or all of the professional development opportunities I described. And so now I can turn it over to her and sit back and relax and watch her put or bring the roadmaps to life for you. What drum roll? Ah, yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Deb. So just imagine there are 11 institutions that are involved in this initiative. And just imagine they're all traveling the highways of Interstate 84, 95, 91, and off highways as well. It's so exciting to work with these institutions, and we're really building leaders at all levels. So you heard Deb talk about higher ed faculty and chairs. You've heard her talk about the lab school directors, teachers, assistant teachers, deans are involved. I mean, you name it. We have so many people are involved, and we're also cultivating leaders with our current students. So again, this is a whole team approach. They're learning about, again, the models of excellence. And when we came up with the professional leadership roadmap, again, we wanted the message to be that everybody can be a leader in this. So the roadmap, as Deb, we just call it the roadmap. But as Deb explained, you will be receiving the kickoff document. And in that kickoff document, you will see all of the foundational resources that we use in this initiative. I think there are over 17, and these are national and state standards, you know, the Connecticut ELDS, developmentally appropriate practice, code of ethical conduct, advancing equity, all these tools that are in that kickoff document. We just took them and put them into a template that is now a living, breathing document. And as Deb said, we meet weekly, we meet bi-weekly with the different teams. So I'm just going to give you some highlights from it. And let me scroll down here. Deb mentioned that we wanted them to start off. Okay, the roadmap has 4 key sections where they have to identify their specializations, curriculum approaches, high quality practices, and community engagement. And we start off by saying, tell us what your strengths are, and where are the growth areas? What do you always do? What are you proud of, and where do you want to go higher? The second section looks at standards, methods, and resources, and they get to assess, what are they currently doing with regard to student instruction? How do students get to observe? How do they get to practice in their lab schools? The third section looks at field experience quality, and they get to assess their own quality with their field experiences, the placements, but they're using NIAC's higher education accreditation standards. And I want to share that, we're fortunate to talk with them on a weekly basis. And one of the things that we heard from one of the institutions was that we know that we're doing great things here in our lab school. We're showing models of excellence, right? Best practices. But we also want our students to be able to go into family childcare programs, to go into community-based programs, to go into school-based programs. And then we were able to talk about that is the linkage to NIAC higher education accreditation, because they are supposed to be, the schools are supposed to be providing these experiences in different types of settings. So while you're seeing the model in the lab school, it's very important for you to partner with the programs in your communities. So that was very exciting because that was at the onset of this initiative, talking about how are we going to now go out and partner with other, programs. And then lastly, as Deb has already talked about, community providers, how they are working with, center-based family childcare. It's just very exciting. I just want to give a couple of examples. In these roadmap meetings, we always talk about the three populations that are being served. So the higher education students, the diverse body of your students, at the different institutions. We're talking about the institutional staff. So how are the lab school staff growing? How are the higher ed faculty growing? How are the deans growing in their knowledge of early childhood education? And then the third community, again, is the community providers. So here are just some examples. As Deb mentioned, lab school directors, when they came together with the community colleges, they said, we didn't have these skills, but we're going to put on, this in a sense of consortium. And they did it in record time and they learned so much. So really kudos to them, the work that they did for the Barbara Kaiser series. In terms of higher ed, the higher ed faculty, they are doing things in new ways. They're looking at their courses. They're saying, you know what, we really aren't using the advancing equity in early childhood education position statement. So how are we going to improve our courses and now put this in here? And that is what is documented in the roadmap. They update them on a regular basis. Here's an example for one program. It was the higher ed program chair meeting with the lab school teachers about the advancing equity in early childhood position statement. And she asked them, tell us what you're doing so that you can model this for the students when they come in to observe, practice, and implement. And she actually turned it into like a learning lesson. She said, if we give, and she actually pulled out some tools, I don't remember what it was, but she gave everyone an equal amount of the same toy, pretending that there are 3 children here. And they were the teachers from each of the classrooms. And she said, if I just give you all the same amount, is that equity? And, they had some conversation. And then she said, but now let's imagine that you have these abilities and needs, and you're a child that has different abilities and needs. And so she did that. She said, now they all have the same. Is that equity? And what happened was that the teachers, again, they really weren't familiar with this position statement, but the higher ed program chair actually took that opportunity to bring it to life for them. And I'm not telling their story, I'm not doing justice to it, but it was fascinating to hear how she took that time. She didn't say, go and read this so that when the students come in, they talk to you about it, it. She took the time to do it with them. Another example is that one of the teachers, they recently had an open house at one of the programs, Gateway, and the lab school teacher, she was speaking in a recent meeting that we had last week at our quarterly meeting. And she said, I never considered myself as public speaker. But when people came into our classroom and I needed to talk to them about the curriculum approach that we use, she said, I became a public speaker. And she's been in the field, she said, I've known her for over 20 years. She said, this is how I have grown. So again, there's growth at all different levels. I'm going to wrap it up by saying that it's just so exciting to see how they are collaborating, working with each other. They're thinking outside the box. And I'll just give this one more example. They said, we've been using modified Montessori. And why is it modified? We now need to make sure that we become certified, complete Montessori approach, right? Another one is Reggio Emilia. You'll be hearing about Reggio Emilia. You'll be hearing about high scope. And then lastly, they're thinking about, how do we collaborate with each other and go on bus tours? So we're going to visit the different lab schools to see what their approaches are, and then bring family childcare providers and bring center-based into our programs to see all these models so that they can then take them and replicate them in their own programs. So we're very excited about this.
Well, thank you so much. Any questions? Yes, Ava.
I have a few, but if Commissioner, if you think this is an OEC question and maybe we can talk later, then just let
Yeah,
me know.
Go ahead.
I'm curious, right now in the conversation of all these wonderful programs like the lab school, we want continuity. You know, parents and providers want to be able to have access to them. So I'm just curious about funding. Are you guys okay? You know, does anyone have to make sure that we're advocating this session, next session, to continue those programs to be available?
I think I can take that question,
Yeah.
but I do appreciate it. And Deb Fliss is here, and Deb, you feel free to add in. But working with Julie at CCDF and thinking about our plan, our federal funds plan, our plan for federal funds, quality improvement initiatives. This is what we consider a quality improvement initiative, and we're going to look for ways to continue this. And we have funding, I believe, through 2026. Is that correct right now? But then we're doing a lot of hard thinking about how to maximize our CCDF, our Child Care Development Fund funds for this. So it's a really good question, and we'll bring it to the cabinet if it seems like we're not going to continue this. But this is one of our learnings in the pandemic, was that our higher ed system needed to be aligned. And we had a speaker this week talking to our workforce group as a Blue Ribbon panel, and it said one of the first things you need to do in a state is to get your higher ed system aligned with being accredited by the same body. So you don't have different colleges doing different things. And over the past, thanks to CSCU and our private colleges and a few challenging conversations, we have been able to get pretty much all of our colleges in the state but one aligned with the NAEYC higher education accreditation. And that's aligned with Elevate, which is our program accreditation. And one of the strengths of Connecticut is we are relying on existing systems versus sort of us making up our own system of what should higher ed have. It's all aligned with the unifying framework, with accreditation. And we're grateful because it means these colleges don't just have to go through their teacher certification accreditation, which is very challenging. They add this, but these funds help that happen because it gives them the staffing they need to go through another accreditation system to keep that focus on young children, because it's very easy for colleges to get super focused on elementary ed where there are way more majors. We hope not for long, but we didn't want to lose this infrastructure, the early childhood higher ed infrastructure. So we're going to keep focused on this. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. My second and final question on this topic is, Elsa and Deb, you mentioned again, the wonderful structure and availability of this program. And even though for some people this might be a new conversation, labs have been around for 86 years. So it's great that Connecticut still, keeps on trucking. So my curiosity for the providers who are watching this later at home is, where do they go? Is there a website?
How can they find out about these professional development opportunities that the lab schools are offering? I think if I was a director, that'd be my question.
They're currently always posting them on the ECE listserv because we know we can reach a really large group of people that way. We also encourage any other local community promotion that can happen. And as I think I referred to, I might have forgotten, we're going to have individual, now this will be hard for them to know to go look for it, but individual lab school pages on our web page, with our web pages that will promote upcoming professional development in each lab school. And hopefully the lab school is going to be developing relationships that they'll be promoting it locally.
Right.
So those are the plans right now. And they can certainly be expanded if we have additional ideas. Yes, ma'am.
Elsa, you want to?
Just want to add real quickly. So collaboration and connections, they can find out about it through Connecticut AEYC because we've been collaborating with them. You can find out about it through their school readiness councils. I'm telling you, they are going out and they are making things happen. They collaborated with New Haven's Early Childhood Resource Center. So in their own communities, that they can also find out.
And one more thing I'd like to add too is that in a very recent promotion on the listserv, the lab school in question was also promoting to the staff family childcare networks, which is another big goal of ours, to make those connections, and also included the navigators and the AQIS facilitators so that they in turn could promote. So they're getting the idea of their own promotion and making these connections So hopefully that will do the trick.
Thank you so much for sharing all of the stories, number one. And I just wanted to tell you a little personal story. So my daughter came home the other day. She's in high school, and the lab school is partnering with her high school, and they were able to go and visit the lab school. And she just came back so excited and really much more knowledgeable about child development and what it takes to, and how important the early years are. And so they're reaching back, right, to the high school years as well. And so just wanted to share that because
The beginning of the early childhood education pipeline.
that's right. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think just one last thing, these questions and input stress the early childhood providers, even though they're working so hard and they're so tired, they're always looking for opportunities to get out. And when you talked about the walkthrough of the lab school at UConn, I know like at St. Joe's, when there used to be a model lab school program, a grant that I ran, and we would have 2,000 visitors a year that would come to see the classrooms in the evenings or in the day. And, you know, that was sort of part of the inspiration that SDE had this model early childhood lab school back in the early 2000s. And so hearing that that's happening again is so exciting. That was our hope. And hearing Elena's story really gives me hope. But I just also suggest maybe talking to Dewani, and Dewani thinking about if when we send messages out to all licensed programs, because the listserv is great, but what we're learning through this blue ribbon panel process is that we reach a whole different group of providers if we send messages out to all licensed providers. So maybe there's a way to regionalize that with Dewani to figure out how we could connect to our licensed programs as well. So we'll look to improve our communication for those listening at home saying, I've never heard of this. And I'm sure many of you on the call have, but we'll reach out to those harder to reach providers using our network. So thank you. Thank you so much for your work. It's hard starting something new. Okay, I'm going to ask Julie and Dewani to maybe, Julie, if you don't mind going up where we're presenting, and I think Jordan and Shekhar from Deloitte are going to be joining you. We're really proud of the Parent Portal 1.0, I guess we call it. And I hope Julie or Dewani, you can share some of the information about our Parent Portal 1.0 that I think 2 weeks ago was written up in the Wall Street Journal as a state innovation. And then I suggest Shekhar is going to talk about the Parent Portal 2. And again, those of you home and here, please speak up because you might have ideas that Deloitte or our team here and can improve the Parent Portal 2.0. Our goal here is to make early childhood education more accessible to families in Connecticut using technology. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Dewani from OEC.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I want to take a moment to just say how excited and how pleased we are to have our invaluable Deloitte partners here with us today. We have Shaker Kennedy, we have Jordan Schneidman, who's here, and I believe Kyle Settles is online. And JJ is online. So we have some additional Deloitte folks joining us online, as well as our Care for Kids United Way folks that are, I'm sure, are online as well. Here to talk today about the Office of Early Childhood's Care for Kids Parent Portal. This has been one of Commissioner Vai's priority goals for the past few years, and we appreciate her leadership and support in this endeavor. Together with Deloitte, United Way, Care for Kids, and the Child Care Development Fund, the CCDF team at OEC have worked collaboratively to move a family's tedious paperwork process to an online platform for ease of access for families across Connecticut. In alignment with the governor's vision to have Connecticut be the most family-friendly state, the Office of Early Childhood is dedicated to providing high quality, just making sure where we're on, where the slide, high quality childcare and children's services to the residents of Connecticut. By giving families the right tools to manage their childcare benefits, we can reach more residents and impact more children within the state. The vision for the OEC Parent Portal is to allow parents to fully manage their Care for Kids interactions online. For example, applying for childcare, viewing their current benefits, reporting any changes in household circumstances or demographics, renewing their benefits, digitizing paper-based communication platforms for parents, and automating data integration and reducing manual efforts for Care for Kids operations. So I'm going to hand it over to Dwani to talk about the evolution.
So hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kristen Didano, I work with Julie on our CCDF team. And so before I hand it over to Duani, I'm going to give a little bit of historical context as to what was happening before Parent Portal. So before we had Parent Portal and online applications, everything was done by paper. So applications were done on paper, all documentation was submitted to the Care for Kids program, either by mail, by fax, or by the Dropbox that Care for Kids has on site. All correspondence was done by paper using the same methods. There was a lack of clarity around eligibility requirements and a minimum online presence. So back before we implemented Parent Portal, we held feedback sessions throughout the state to really kind of understand what it was that families wanted and needed for Care for Kids to make it more user-friendly for them so that they could access the benefits that they were entitled to. And by far, the most common piece of feedback that we got was communicate with us via email, make it easier for us to apply. So in conjunction with our partners over at United Way, we worked on streamlining policies. They have been amazing. Also with Deloitte, helping us with the impact system. So fast forward a little bit, now we have Parent Portal. And I'm just going to back up again one more time a little bit. But when we were doing everything by paper, we had high call volumes. There was a high percentage of applications that were ineligible or incomplete, which led to increased processing times. And then unclear eligibility and verification requirements for parents. So there was a lot of confusion. What do I have to submit? Why do I have to submit it? How many days do I have to submit it? So all things that were taken into consideration as we really thought out what the Parent Portal needed to be the best for our families. So I'm going to hand it over to Duani to talk about Release 1.
Hi, everyone. I am Duani Pandya, and I am the IT Director for the Office of Early Childhood. Thank you, Kristen. That was a great introduction for what our landscape was before the Parent Portal came into picture. So as Kristen was saying, there was a clear identified need for something that was online in nature, where parents could just easily go and screen for eligibility to see if they qualified for the Care for Kids program, and then create an account and submit their application online. So those were the building blocks of the Parent Portal Release 1, which has been complete and in production since September of 2021. As we all know, when it's an online application, there is account creation and login capabilities that are available with that portal. Application of the benefits for the first time was something that, you know, they could not have done before online. So that was a function of this 1.0 release. We also had the eligibility pre-screening that parents could go through and put their income and other, valid family circumstances and see if they were eligible to get the Child Care for Kids funds. And then they were able to upload documentation for verification for purposes of identification for eligibility. We are very proud to say that the adoption rate of the Parent Portal Release 1, because it was meant to fulfill a need that was clearly lacking, the adoption rate for the Parent Portal has been 82% online applications, which is just amazing. We've had to date more than 25,000 accounts that are created by parents for the Parent Portal. So that is also incredible in the limited amount of time that we've been live. We've seen a phone call reduction of 50% compared to the paper-based application process before. And to date, we have had more than 58,000 verification documents that were submitted on behalf of parents for eligibility verification. And this is a shameless plug. We were nominated by the NACIO, which is a national accreditation for the state CIOs, as an award finalist for our program. And as Beth alluded earlier, we were also, Deloitte was sponsored by Wall Street Journal for this project and their work with the state of Connecticut. So this has been a very impressive project so far. And we don't want to keep it there. Obviously, life changes happen for parents, and we want to be able to support that. So with that, we are looking to launch the Parent Portal 2.0, and a lot of the work is in progress right now, where the parents would be able to view their benefits online. So it's not just an application process that the first release was. Now we're supporting the journey for these parents through with the 2.0 release. So they're able to view their benefits online, report changes in income, family situations, etc., through the portal, be able to renew their benefits year after year through the portal, as well as we're building a notifications and correspondence piece where parents would be able to get all of their required renewal notifications and such just by going to the parent portal online. Obviously, there is a lot of data integration and automation needs between the stuff that's being entered to the through the portal to our benefit systems for easy access on the back end, as well as easy access to the parents on the front end. And there is also a lot of reporting that we will be able to gather as a result of this Parent Portal 2.0. So our projections for success and overall outcomes for the second release of the Parent Portal, we're hoping that 70% renewals will be done through this online Parent Portal 2.0 platform, as well as for those renewals and for those parents, 100% of their communication will happen through digital channels, and we will have to rely on paper-based communications lesser and lesser. Similarly to the earlier release, we are also hoping that 50% reduction in the renewal related or change submission related queries to come in. And our manual data entry operations by United Way staff will be reduced by 90% because of this online and data automation and everything else that's built into this portal. So with that, I am going to hand off the mic to our system integrations vendor project director, Shekhar.
Thank you, Dhwani. Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Kristen. Just to introduce quickly, my name is Shekhar Kanade. I'm the project manager. I've been working with OEC in building out the impact system as well as the parent portal system for over the last 6 years now. Before I get into any of these details, truly want to appreciate all the effort the agency staff is putting into this. Everything that we heard from the providers, from the families about 2 years back, all of that effort being put into a live system, it really means a lot. For me, it's a really passion now to get it done and to achieve this vision jointly with OEC. So truly appreciate that. To start with here, I would want to project the timelines for release 2. So as you see on the slide here, we are currently in mid of our implementation. The entire planning process is complete. We are just begin implementation. There are about 6 months left in our project. By end of September is when we plan to launch the parent portal. What I want to show today here is some of the simple scenarios, that how this portal will come into existence, come into real life, right? To start with, we've taken a simple example, a character here, Jane Doe. This is by no means a real name. Single mother work and needs help for paying for childcare in the state of Connecticut. And, she has recently heard about OEC parent portal from her childcare provider, and she's decided to check it out. So if we go to the next screen out here, Um, this is the page where once the parent creates a login, once James creates a login, she will see this as a dashboard where either she can continue to do pre-screening or start a new application, or if she's already enrolled into the program, she can go and just link her current benefits and view the current benefits. So once in this scenario, we are assuming that they are going to click on the start a new application button. And when they click that, it basically the series of questions and applications that will be asked. This is more or less very similar to the paper application. This is already live in production, for which we heard the 82% adoption rate. Again, really got a very positive feedback in terms of the digital adoption and the digital look and feel. This is in line with all other Connecticut digital projects, which means that the account that is being used by to renew your DMV license or to start a business registry system, it's the same account that will be used by the citizens to even do OEC related operations. So that's an enterprise thinking again from the leadership in Connecticut, which is brought into OEC as well. Moving on to the next part here is what we are really doing in release 2 now, right? So this is all live, but in release 2, to start with view benefits, the same person continuing Jane, once she's applied and once she's receiving benefits, she need not call the operations center anymore. She can only directly go to her account, the login, and she can view her benefits out there. She can download her certificate. She will exactly know what is the renewal due date, when she has to submit the documents. She will even get a fancy action item on the top on the dashboard to say that this is when your renewal is due and these are the documents that you need to submit. Moving on to the next slide. Once we view the benefits, the next step also is, as I said, the submission of renewal. We all know that for Care for Kids, every 12 months, the parent has to submit a renewal packet. And we have really tried to streamline this renewal process out here in a way that every year, if there is no change in circumstance for an end user, if you want to go to the next slide, what we have done here is like almost a summary view of all the data that already exists with us, right? So they see this everything in a very simplified view. And Jane, if her household members are the same, if the household details are the same, if the income is the same, all she has to do is click on confirm, and it will be a very simple, almost a less than 10 click kind of renewal submission, which can happen without any hassle. So we have tried to simplify that overall, and it can be done anywhere, from a desktop, from a phone, from any device, at any point sitting at home. And then this is a view where we have we can see all the summary. They can go and change any of the details. And on the final screen, what we have here is almost these 6 sections or 7 sections that we have. Once they are complete, they have confirmed all those 7 sections. A green checkbox will show, and that means it signifies that the entire renewal process is complete, and they will now hear back from the agency on their approval or a revised certificate for them. So I think that's pretty much it. I think again, we are in early stages of our implementation here. We would be happy to demonstrate this, once the system is in a much advanced stage.
Thank you so much, Shaker and Dwani and Julie. Any questions? Yes.
So my question is, how are you updating providers on where these applications stand?
So just to rephrase the question, you're saying, is it like, how are the providers getting notified about the application process? Sure. So currently, the process that we have is once the parent submits an application, and once there's a concept called as parent provider agreement. The parent has to still provide the parent provider agreement, and once that PPA is received and once the certificate is issued, the provider will also get a copy of this certificate. So whoever is the provider, along with the parent, the provider will also be notified that this is the child that is enrolled with you. Did that answer your question?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay.
Well, Edie, you know what? I think it'd be worth, if you don't mind, talking about the challenges that providers are faced with Care for Kids so that the cabinet has a sense, and then maybe Shaker and Julie and Dewani can talk about any thoughts or progress in terms of provider supports, because it is a real challenge. So if you don't mind
Sure.
just summarizing.
So as a provider of half my children are on Care for Kids. I have 30 children in my program, and each of their certificates are due at different times. So our parents are, because we're a state funded center, are really dealing with just their cell phone, and they have no way to submit any of the forms. So they're giving us the forms and we're submitting them for them. So they don't have their own identification. They don't have their own information that you guys are saying that they could have. Like, they don't create their own accounts. And that is difficult for a lot of our families. So I know you said you've got 82% of the people are doing this, but that seems a little high to me. Just because 15 of my families were submitting all the paperwork for them. We know when their due date is. We know when all their paperwork is due, because we have the capability of submitting that for them online. Like, we can go on and scan things. They can't scan any of their paperwork on their cell phones. And a lot of them don't know how to access computer systems in the libraries and things like that. That's what we're finding. And just getting them to apply, even if we told them, go on this website, they're going to go on it on their phone. They're going to create all these things. And then how are they going to submit all their paperwork? I mean, that's one of the big difficulties right now.
That's a really good question. And I think it's a good one for our team to work to answer and to hear, because I know their strategies, but there's a sense that there's still challenges. So any response to Edie?
So something that they can do is use their phone to take the photos of the documents that they have to submit and then upload them via the online portal through their phone. But I think something that complicates it is that from a parent perspective, when you call United Way, they're not allowed to provide information to anybody other than the families, which is a complication too. So all things that we need to explore, and I think we could do better in terms of figuring out ways to get those documents uploaded, or how we can assist the providers. So maybe that's something we can consider, is going out for feedback. Yeah.
And one of the other challenges is just knowing when we take a new child and they're transferring to us. They already have Care for Kids. They're transferring to us. We give them the parent provider form. We never hear back. I mean, a lot of times we just don't hear anything back until we go on our portal at Care for Kids and check and see who's actually on our list now.
So I think my follow-up question to that, just so everybody else can hear. So when the certificate is issued, then are you as a provider not receiving the copies of that?
Not physically, no.
Okay.
So thank you very much. These are things we need to definitely take into account. And I think one thing that will help is if we do a couple stakeholder sessions. So as we're in development, we can consider all of these difficulties or barriers for families and for providers, and make necessary adaptations in there. This is supposed to be as family friendly as possible on your phone, like other, types of smart, your smart device. But I think we would really benefit from hearing from the providers and what they're finding out as they're working with families, because our Care for Kids folks at United Way can only go so far with that information. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. This is something I hear from providers, and what happens is they can wait a couple months and not realize the family's not going to be on a certificate, and then they're out that money, which that's why the improving processing times, all these families getting on it and reducing calls and improving processing times helps everybody. But I think stakeholder sessions and feedback sessions will help. Ava, did you?
Sometimes it's good to borrow best practices from other agencies. So one example, going through the permission of which family member has access to the information, or how can you relay when you're making that call from 211. In Access Health CT, their website, very early on, they were able to add to their software and to the application a question that gives you permission to designate a person who can speak on your behalf. That person doesn't necessarily have to be a family member. It's as long as you, the application that you're holding with, attached to your PII, give permission to that very specific person. Moving forward, that person can call on your behalf, could request information on your behalf. And, I don't know the legal details of how they were able to allow that, but maybe borrowing some of their best practices and transferring it over could be helpful. As for the comments Edie made, 100% ditto with you. Totally agree with everything that you just said. If you want to quantify those opinions of providers, we've done polls on our Monday morning meetings where sometimes we have 700 providers from center and home-based care who have vocalized these types of frustrations.
Really helpful. This is why we have a cabinet to make us better. So anyone at home, because I know there are providers on the call. So Kristen, anyone on the Zoom?
Ruth Ann had her hand raised.
Great.
Ruth Ann,
Ruth?
do you want to unmute and share?
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. I just wanted to say thank you. I love the inputs and the work that is being done on the Care for Kids portal. As a parent, I have utilized both the old way of sending stuff all by mail and paper and having to call the office and make sure they received it, and then the processing time. And then the portal was launched, the portal one was launched, and I loved it. I loved being able to just submit documents by taking a picture on my phone and sending it in. And it definitely did help me. I do understand the concerns though of not every parent knows how to utilize the software. And I guess just making it as user-friendly as possible, that all parents are able to, as simple as possible, and user-friendly is going to be very crucial. But for me, I definitely benefited from this. And I love to hear that the renewal process is going to be much easier instead of having to complete a whole new form, having to go to my provider again and having them fill out everything. If there's no changes, I love the ability to just click a button and everything is submitted. Again, it's for renewal. I love that. And I'm looking forward to that. I just wanted to know what is the timeline for this? I know there's still much work to be done, but what is the timeline that we're looking at for this to be launched or up and running?
Ruthian, it really excites me to hear the excitement in your voice about this portal. It is slated to go live in September of this year. Thank you
Sounds
again. I
good.
do
Thank
understand.
you.
I also do understand the challenges that ED has conveyed to us, and we will definitely look into that.
Thank you.
Anybody else online? Okay. Just a thought I had as I was listening to Edie and having sat in meetings that Ava described with feedback. It's very often it's the providers helping the parents do this. So it might be useful for OEC to do some professional development sessions, or even work with the navigators to be ready to help programs to help parents, because it really does end up being a lot of hand holding. So thanks for that feedback. Anyone else in the room? Okay, well, Shekhar and Jordan, thank you for your help as always. And I know there are others online from Deloitte and Dewani for your leadership, and Julie for your leadership. I'll also mention that Governor Lamont, this is a priority of his, and you heard Shekhar say this is this enterprise software. So this is the same way a parent gets into the DMV, same way a parent might get in to apply for SNAP benefits. And Dewani's been a real leader on My CT, which is a cross-agency platform to help families as they're applying for Care for Kids. They can also apply for SNAP benefits or for WIC. And so the governor is so committed to making sure families know what's available to help them. And so there's still work to do. I know your end of May is the My CT launch. And because Duani's one of the leaders, OEC is going to be part of that launch with its Care for Kids. So all of these pieces are connected for families. And that's our goal, is to make it more family friendly. So thank you so much. Okay. We're a little behind, but I think we have time to talk about the kindergarten age. I'm just going to ask Maggie if you can come up and share the bill number, and you can either come over here or over there and just talk about the bill related to kindergarten age, and then we'll take feedback. And I'll give OEC's perspective on the bill, and then we'll take feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Bai. Kindergarten age, this has been raised many times over the years, and it's been requested that we actually have this discussion about this. When is the start date, right, for kindergarten? And currently in Connecticut, it is January 1st for the start date. We are a little bit of an outlier, I will say. We are one of very few who have this. Most kindergarten start ages are September, or some other August and October. So there's a bill 6884. It's a big education bill around recruitment and retention of teachers that was introduced in the Education Committee. Section 10 of the bill has the kindergarten start age, taking it back from where it is currently, January to September 1st. It went to the Appropriations Committee and it did not get voted out. So technically that bill is dead. But what we have heard in our conversations with legislators, that this concept of a kindergarten start age is not dead. It is definitely in play. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Bai so she can explain our position on the bill, on the concept, and then we want to get feedback from all of you about your thoughts about this.
So thank you, Maggie. And we've been tracking this bill, and I've been for years working on this bill. Our position is that until the state has universal preschool, that we do not support the change of date, because it's a problem that would leave a quarter of our children in Connecticut who maybe haven't been able to access preschool with nothing for a whole other year. And so that's been our position, is that when there's universal preschool, we're fine with the age change. And I think the other part of my testimony was the people who complain most loudly about the date are wealthier families who are anxious about, should I keep my kid back or not? And the families most likely to be negatively impacted by such a change are families who can't afford preschool and thus have to wait a whole other year for their child to have a formal experience. And also kindergarten, just like preschool, is part of childcare for families. And so there's an economic burden. So that's been our testimony. It's not about the date. It's really more about children having access to education as soon as possible. But we are really open to conversation. There are a lot of different opinions on this, and parents start to ask when their kids are 8 months old, should I keep them back? And I always say, you don't have no idea what your child's going to be like at 4.5. And there are also preschools that do not allow the child to come back for that third year. And OEC has had some policies that we're looking at that have made that difficult. And I always say, if a child's not ready for kindergarten, then they're ready for preschool, and they should have access to preschool. But that's sort of where we are, but open to feedback online or questions or research, whatever people want to talk about on this. Yes, Edie.
I just want to say that I agree with everything that you've just said. And I have said it every year that it's come up for, trying to adopt a different time period. And it's kids like that are in our programs, the school readiness programs, the CDCs. Those are the kids that really could use that extra year a lot of times. And to be lost in that system is going to be tough on them.
Thank you, Edie. Anyone else? Anyone online? Okay, well, I have a feeling we'll have an answer very soon. Yep. Oh, there is a comment. Hooray.
Joanne, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, has there been any thought about transitioning so that the change doesn't happen all at once?
Joanne, it's a great question.
I'm concerned that in our town, I'm the director of the Early Childhood Collaborative of Southington. I'm concerned that right now we don't have any spaces for 4-year-olds. They're all full in our preschool programs. And if we need to keep a quarter of the kids in a program for another year for that transition year, there's not enough room.
Yeah, I think that timing is really important. It's important to let your legislator know that concern, so that the time, if it happens, that at least the timing is phased in, or there are a couple years notice, so families that are planning and programs that are planning can account for that. So I do think it's important because, as Maggie said, and we're being polite when we say, we have a sense that this might pop up again. And before the end of session. So if you have questions or concerns, do let your legislators know. And we've been in touch with the Office of the Governor on this issue as well. But the fact that Connecticut, I think, is one of 1 or 2 states that has been able to hold this off for this long speaks to our commitment to universal preschool and equity as a state. But with the strong push from kindergarten teachers and others, you can only hold it off so long, is my thinking. So if it's going to happen, at least let it be planful.
Yeah, so we will be monitoring this bill, or whatever, wherever it turns up in another bill. So, and having conversations with the education co-chairs. But as Commissioner said, we've been successful actually in holding it off this long.
Definitely. I'm no longer in the legislature, which means I have less power at this time of year than usual. It's easier when you're in the Senate or the House. But we do feel that folks are listening, and things will be resolved as they're resolved, and we will work our best. And I will say the number of children with access to preschool now is far greater than 10 years ago when this push started. And the other thing is OEC is looking at its policies to make sure that if that means a 3rd year of school readiness or child daycare, that that's accessible to the family per OEC policy. So I'm looking, are any of our ECE staff here? Elena, I just said that. Okay, take a note.
There is a question,
Yeah,
a follow-up
sure.
question online.
Sure.
You mentioned universal preschool. Is there a timeline for that?
Oh, whenever you say those 3 words, it starts something. I had a new term I was going to use, public school preschool. When I say universal preschool, and this is sort of one of the principles of our Blue Ribbon panel that we were talking about today, we in Connecticut, like New York City, like Washington, D.C., believe in a mixed model, not a public school universal preschool. Sometimes people hear universal preschool and they think that means public school. In Connecticut, we have decades of investments in high quality community-based programs. Public schools are serving a good number of folks in preschool. We think for families to have the choices they need, we need robust choices for families, including family childcare, community-based childcare, and public schools. But when I say universal preschool, I mean that every child has access to early childhood before they hit kindergarten. So, and we're very close. We have as many preschool spaces in Connecticut as we have preschoolers. We actually have more than enough. They're just not all located in the right places, and they're not all affordable to families. And that's part of the work of the Blue Ribbon panel. But some of the pre-work for the Blue Ribbon panel has shown some real encouraging signs in terms of access to preschool, discouraging signs in terms of access to infant toddler care. So that's been a focus as well. I hope that was helpful. Any other questions? Okay, well, we're open to comment or questions now at the end of the meeting. Any other updates for the good of the order? I hope we have more sign. Oh, Maggie,
Did you mean, and you meant, just to clarify, comments also from the public?
Yeah.
As well.
Yep. Any comments, questions? Thank you, Maggie. Okay, well, I think this was really an informative meeting, really thankful for the participation of our cabinet. And please let us know if you have ideas for topics that you'd like to hear about. Eloisa, who is working on the Blue Ribbon panel, is also going to be transitioning to support the Early Childhood Cabinet because the work of the panel will come, this is the legislative body of early childhood planning. So that work will be coming to this body, in the end so we have a structure that the work continues. So Eloisa will also be working on this cabinet as well. So we're grateful to have her on board. And Kristen and Julie, thanks for your leadership on these meetings. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye-bye. Meeting is closed. Am I supposed to say something like that? Oh, wait. Judge Judy here.